saw continuous general strikes across East Pakistan. It resulted in more intense talks between Yahya Khan and Sheikh Mujibur Rahman's camp.
Quite intensive negotiations went on in which I was involved. But as we discovered, all this was in fact a big show for Yahya Khan to move in reinforcements.
As the negotiations were going on, arms and soldiers from West Pakistan began quietly arriving by air and sea in East Pakistan. In March 1971, the Pakistani army began its brutal campaign.
Yahya initiated his crackdown on the night of 25th March. He flew out and gave orders to Tikka Khan to begin what came to be infamously known as Operation Searchlight, where you went for mass terrorization and killing.
Sheikh Mujibur Rahman was arrested and taken to West Pakistan. Civil war in East Pakistan had begun.
I was at home when the crackdown actually started. I had presumed that they would only go for all the sort of political high command, and we, as you may say, as the economists and professionals, would simply be sort of kept out of this. But the moment the curfew was lifted on the 27th morning, when some friends came over to my house, they said that, do you not know what has been happening? They have been going around killing people at a large scale, and they've gone into the university and they have shot teachers and other people. And since you have been close to Mujib, you better get out of your house.
Rahman Subhan managed to escape to Kolkata in India. During the remainder of 1971, he served as ambassador at large for the Bangladeshi independence movement. On December the 16th, 1971, with the help of the Indian Army, the Pakistan Army surrendered and Bangladesh became an independent country. What does Rahman Subhan think the legacy of the 1970 general election is?
Established the totality of support for a completely, you may say, self-ruled Bangladesh under the leadership of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. And so it gave him the unique power to, in fact, actually speak for the Bengali people. And that was, I think, the real message which the elections actually consolidated.
Rahman Subhan still lives in Dhaka, Bangladesh, from where he was speaking to me, Farhana Haider, for Witness History on the BBC World Service.
This is the BBC World Service, revealing the Kenyan warriors who are now elephant caretakers.
We walk with them in the bush and we sleep with them in the night.
Diverse people working for a common cause.
We were not in good relationship with them before. All those elephants has brought us together.
Hear how elephants became a catalyst for peace. With me, Michael Kaloki.
Warrior Elephant Guardians, Tuesday at 9:20 GMT. And in 30 minutes, Digital Planet with Gareth Mitchell.
Like the virus itself, false information about COVID vaccines is contagious and dangerous. What can be done to combat the infodemic of vaccine myths spreading online?
Stay with us. The newsroom is next on the BBC World Service, the world's radio station.
Hello, America's trillion-dollar coronavirus rescue plan has been stalled for months. President-elect Joe Biden says it's obvious who's to blame.
People are struggling to pay their rent, worried that after Christmas they'll be thrown out before New Year's. What's the United States Senate doing? Nothing.
But is a deal finally in sight? Meanwhile, there's economic pain in Germany too, as shops are forced to close.
Horrible. I will lose a lot of business for the future, that's for sure.
Also today, at 4 hours GMT, he murdered 9 people. Now the man dubbed Japan's Twitter killer has been sentenced to death. Later in the programme, we hear about the Siberian hermit moving home with the help of a billionaire. And
it's not time to make a change. Just relax.
Yusuf Cat Stevens gives a creative twist to some of his best-known songs. All on the newsroom with me, Nick Miles.
I'm Stuart McIntosh with the BBC News. Hello. In a break with President Trump, the most powerful Republican in the U.S. Congress, Senator Mitch McConnell, has congratulated Joe Biden on winning the presidential election. Mr. McConnell also urged fellow Republicans not to object when Congress meets to ratify the result in January. Here's Anthony Zerker.
Mitch McConnell's announcement came amidst a flurry of similar statements from Republican members of Congress. The party's reluctance to acknowledge Joe Biden's win may be fading, with just over a month to go until Inauguration Day. This morning, Mr. Biden said that he had spoken to Senator McConnell for the first time since the election and that they would meet in person soon. The Senate will be responsible for confirming Joe Biden's administration and judicial appointments. Control of the chamber will be decided in runoff elections in January for 2 seats in Georgia.
More details are emerging about Mr. Biden's likely cabinet choices. He's expected to nominate 2 women to key environmental posts. A long-time champion of renewable energy, cars, Jennifer Granholm, is tipped to take over the Energy Department, and the environmentalist, Gina McCarthy, will take up a new role of coordinating climate policy at the White House. The 4 top U.S. congressional leaders are holding a second meeting in the space of a few hours to try to break months of stalemate over a coronavirus relief package. The meetings are the most significant effort yet to reach a bipartisan agreement on a $1.4 trillion package. More than 370 religious leaders are calling for a ban on gay conversion therapy that aims to change a person's sexual orientation. Representatives of all the world's major faiths will present a statement at the British Foreign Office later today. Harry Farley reports.
Many of the religious leaders behind this call have spoken out on the issue before, but the intervention is significant, not just because of the Foreign Office support, but because many of the concerns about a ban have come from faith groups. Conservative religious leaders fear it could impede religious freedom and lead to the government passing legislation which sets out what they can and cannot teach. In the summer, Boris Johnson repeated a promise to ban conversion therapy, but details have still not been published.
Australia is to appeal to the World Trade Organization over China's imposition of punitive tariffs on imports of Australian barley earlier this year. Trade Minister Simon Birmingham said Beijing's 80% surcharge lacked any basis.
We want a specific outcome that recognises Australia's grain growers and barley industry operate in nothing other than entirely commercial ways and with the utmost of integrity. But we also want a systemic outcome that identifies the fact that the decisions that have been reached by Chinese authorities lack basis and ultimately leads, we hope, to change in relation to their practices.
This is the BBC News. Facebook says it's removed 2 networks based in Russia and 1 linked to the French military for what it described as disinformation campaigns targeting African countries. All were removed for breaking Facebook policy. The company said the rival campaigns largely focused on the Central African Republic, which is holding elections later this month. The Mexican Congress has passed a law to regulate the presence of foreign agents in the country, despite concerns in Washington that it could hamper anti-drugs operations. It would require any Mexican officials to get permission from a high-level security panel before meeting a foreign agent. More from Will Grant.
The measure to remove the immunity of foreign agents was overwhelmingly backed by Mexico's lower house of Congress just a week after the Senate had approved the law. All that remains is for the President, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, to sign the legislation, and he has already indicated his willingness to do so. However, it is likely to be the first thorn in Mexico's relationship with the incoming Biden administration. Although the law doesn't specify U.S. agents, it follows the controversial arrest on drug charges of the former Mexican Defense Minister, Salvador Cienfuegos, by Drug Enforcement Agency officials in Los Angeles.
One of the wealthiest women in the world, Mackenzie Scott, says she's given away more than $4 billion to food banks and emergency relief funds in the space of 4 months. Ms. Scott, the ex-wife of Amazon billionaire Jeff Bezos, said the pandemic had been a wrecking ball in the lives of many struggling Americans. A lost artifact from the Great Pyramid of Giza in Egypt has been found in a cigar tin in the university in Scotland. The piece of cedar wood, dating back 5,000 years, was one of 3 items known as the Dixon Relics, named after a British engineer who explored the pyramid in 1872. And that is the BBC News.
Thanks. You're listening to the newsroom from the BBC World Service. I'm Nick Miles. Now, more than ever, America needs politicians to bury their differences. But for weeks, Congress has been at a stalemate over $1 trillion plus relief package to deal with the coronavirus pandemic. But now there is some hope. Senior Republicans and Democrats in Congress are said to be close to a deal. The Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell, said the lawmakers would not leave Washington until they'd agreed.
We've been trying for months. Shouldn't have been put in this position. We should have done this a long time ago. I've been saying for weeks, and you've been listening to me saying for weeks, let's put aside the things we can't agree on and do the things we can. That's just another good argument to get it done now, and we're not leaving. I assure you, we're not leaving until we finish this package.
Well, the President-elect, Joe Biden, said that a deal was long overdue.
The United States Senate should have passed the coronavirus and economic relief package months ago. People are hurting. Small businesses closing. People are struggling to pay their rent, worried that after Christmas they'll be thrown out before New Year's. What's the United States Senate doing? Nothing.
I've been speaking to our correspondent in the US, David Willis.
Well, Democrats and Republicans have been at loggerheads for months, Nick, over the terms of a new financial stimulus plan. Democrats want to see funding to ensure that state and local government workers are not laid off, and that would amount to around $1 trillion or so. Democrat leaders say that's needed to safeguard the jobs of first responders, healthcare workers, and so on. Republicans object to that. Less contentious is the proposal that such a bill would also provide funding for small businesses, financial support for vaccine distribution, and so on. But there's a separate and, in a sense, more pressing deadline on the horizon. Funding for the federal government is due to run out later this week, and that means that Congress has to pass a nearly $1.5 trillion bill in order to keep federal agencies ticking over. And there's now talk of perhaps adding coronavirus provisions to that spending package.
David, there does seem to be momentum building now for some kind of agreement. Do you think we're going to get one within the next few hours?
Well, it's looking likely that lawmakers could approve a government funding bill tonight and then continue to discuss a new COVID relief bill over the next few days, thereby giving them a little bit more time to negotiate. Leading members of both parties in the House and the Senate, Nick, have been talking with the Treasury Secretary, Stephen Mnuchin, throughout the day. But if they do pass an overall government spending bill tonight, that only gives them until Friday to agree on the COVID bill. So time very much of the essence right now.
So the Republicans could perhaps pull something off that would benefit the incoming Joe Biden. But if they hold on to the Senate races in Georgia in January, they're going to continue to control the upper house. They're going to make life very difficult for Mr. Biden, aren't they?
You're absolutely right. I mean, Georgia has become one of the country's most competitive political battlegrounds. It was once a Republican stronghold, but Joe Biden flipped the state by a very slim margin, around 12,000 votes in this year's election. Control of the Senate will depend on the outcome of that special election on the 5th of January, and unless Democrats win both of those races, then Senate Republicans will be able to block many of Joe Biden's cabinet nominations, thwart many of his policy initiatives, and that's why Joe Biden was there today, urging voters in Georgia to turn out in record numbers. He said that if John Ossoff and Raphael Warnock are elected, it will enable him to confront the coronavirus pandemic and other national challenges, and as he put it, change the lives of people in Georgia and elsewhere.
David Willis. To Germany now, where tough new coronavirus restrictions are coming into force to try to curb a rise in cases. Schools and non-essential shops are closing. The Chancellor, Angela Merkel, urged people to obey the rules and limit their social contacts in the run-up to Christmas to ensure, as she put it, that it wasn't the last they had with grandparents. Restrictions are going to be relaxed slightly to allow small family gatherings over the festive period, but most other traditions have been cancelled. Our correspondent Jenny Hill sent this report from Dresden.
Mario stands among the elegant angels and simple shepherds in his Christmas shop, proudly shows us the carved wooden decorations for which this region is famous.
So business is dramatically dropping down, so not the same as the years before. So for me, a very hard time for business, yes.
What went through your mind when you heard that decision had been made?
Horrible. I thought, oh no, I will lose a lot of business for the future, that's for sure.
What do you think about the decision?
I think it's a good decision. So, of course, because there are no other plans right now, and we have to do something.
A few doors down, Astrid rearranges silver decorations and antique glassware. There'll be financial help for businesses like this, forced to close at her busiest time of the year. But it's costing the country dear.
It hurts. It hurts, yes.
Can you survive?
I hope. We will see. We will see if we get some help. We will see.
But what's gone wrong for the country which came so successfully through the first wave? Many blame regional leaders who've until now dithered, bickered and resisted Angela Merkel's calls for a tougher countrywide response.
People do not follow all the regulations that were told. I mean, we had to reduce our contacts by about 75%, but I think that didn't work.
Professor Iris Pigiot is the director of the Leibniz Institute for Prevention, Research and Epidemiology.
New Year's Eve and Christmas could be a complete nightmare with increasing numbers and increasing numbers of deaths. I mean, look at the death rate. In 1 week, we have more deaths due to COVID-19 than in 1 year in 2019 due to accidents, traffic accidents. I mean, it has to be changed.
Among the snowy forests of southwestern Germany, one factory is working around the clock. Their purpose-built freezers are in demand, designed to transport and store the German-developed vaccine at the required minus 70 degrees Celsius. Germany hopes, if it's approved, to start vaccinations before the end of the year. Other countries have already begun.
We are producing here a quite high four-digit number of freezers a year.
Peter Binder is the chief executive of the family firm.
We are, say, a handful leading manufacturers in the world making said products, but we have to serve the globe.
Hope then perhaps, but for now, little cheer. Even the traditional mulled wine is off. Drinking alcohol outdoors, banned. In normal times, this square would be packed with people enjoying Dresden's world-famous Christmas market. Not this year. Many assumed those German qualities of efficiency, scientific excellence, strong infrastructure could carry this country through the second wave of the pandemic. Instead, Germany, a country which really cherishes its festive traditions, is all but cancelling Christmas.
Jenny Hill there. Next to a case which has horrified Japan, a serial killer who contacted his victims on social media has been sentenced to death. Takehiro Shiraishi was dubbed the Twitter killer following his arrest back in 2017. Charlotte Gallagher reports.
Takehiro Shiraishi preyed on depressed young women and teenage girls, contacting those who posted suicidal thoughts on Twitter. He told them he could help with their plans or even die alongside them. He killed them in his home, where he also kept body parts. During Shiraishi's trial, he admitted he targeted people who were easy to manipulate. In total, he killed 8 women and 1 man, aged between 15 and 26. The male victim was killed when he confronted Shiraishi about his missing girlfriend. Takehiro Shiraishi admitted murder, but his lawyers argued he shouldn't receive the death penalty, claiming the victims had consented to die because of their social media posts. Japan carries out executions by hanging and is one of the few developed nations to still have capital punishment. This case prompted Twitter to introduce rules against promoting or encouraging suicide. It also led to soul searching across Japan, where suicide rates are amongst the highest in the industrialized world. And although the number of people dying in this way had been dropping over the last decade, there are worrying signs it's been rising during the COVID pandemic.
Charlotte Gallagher. You're listening to the BBC World Service. Still to come on the newsroom, Andy Barwell will join us with all the latest sports news. First, Stuart's here with the headlines.
Senior members of the US Congress are continuing talks to try to end a standoff over a $1.4 trillion coronavirus stimulus package. Shops and schools are closing in Germany from today as part of tough new restrictions designed to contain a surge in COVID cases. And a lost artefact from the Great Pyramid of Giza in Egypt has been found in Scotland.
More on that in a moment. But first, a story involving the unlikely combination of the Siberian wilderness, a 76-year-old hermit, and a billionaire. The newsroom's Gareth Barlow has the details.
It's all about a lady called Agafia Likova, and her story begins in 1936. Her parents were members of an Orthodox sect called the Old Believers, and fearing persecution under Stalin's Russia, they disappeared into the forest, into the wilderness. They kept moving deeper and deeper and deeper until they settled 240 kilometres away from the nearest civilization. They built a home out of the trees that surrounded them, and they remained undetected for over 40 years until a team of geologists just accidentally found them as they flew over in a helicopter. They had been so out of the loop that they didn't know World War II had taken place, they didn't know that man had stepped on the moon, they were unaware of things like plastic packaging for food. Well, Agafia Likova was born in that hut, and for the first 35 years of her life, she never met another human being outside of her family. Now, all of her family have unfortunately subsequently died, but she remains there. She's briefly left a handful of times for medical reasons, but she's carried on living in that dwelling. She's now 76 and is of course facing another harsh Siberian winter, and this is where the billionaire comes in, a man by the name of Oleg Deripaska. He made his money in aluminium, and he has pledged to build her a new home to her specifications next to her current residence. It's being shipped in by helicopter, 18 flights back and forth, and the shelter will give more protection for both her and her goats. And to give a bit of context as to how severe these winters are, in 1961 it was so bad they lost all their food, the family was resorting to eating their own shoes.
Gareth Barlow, we've all misplaced things from time to time, haven't we? But a lost artefact from the Great Pyramid of Giza, dating back 5,000 years, has been found in a cigar tin at a Scottish university. The fragment of wood was just one of a handful of objects discovered in what's known as the Queen's Chamber. It had been missing for more than a century. Alan Johnston reports.
In 1872, a British engineer called Wayneman Dixon was exploring the Great Pyramid. In a shaft in the Queen's Chamber, he found 3 items. There was a grappling hook, a ball made of rock, and a sliver of wood from a cedar tree. They became known as the Dixon Relics. The hook and the ball were kept safe in the British Museum, but the piece of wood was missing. There was a suggestion that it was in the vast collections of Aberdeen University's museum, but it couldn't be found there. Then, during a review of the Asian archive, a curator, Abir Eladini, came across a cigar tin. It was marked with an old Egyptian flag, and inside was the fragment of cedar wood. The rare item had simply been wrongly placed among Asian artefacts rather than Egyptian ones. It had been donated to Aberdeen University in 1946 by the daughter of a Scots doctor who had accompanied Wayneman Dixon on his exploration of the Great Pyramid. The curator, Miss Eladini, is herself Egyptian, and far from the banks of the Nile in northeast Scotland, she'd rediscovered an item of real significance in the study of ancient Egypt.
That was Alan Johnston reporting. Now here's Stuart with some of the other stories from our news desk.
The Canadian fashion designer Peter Nygard has been charged in the United States with trafficking women and girls for sex. Prosecutors say the designer lured dozens of women to venues in the US, the Bahamas and Canada over a period of decades. He and his associates are alleged to have sexually assaulted them, sometimes after drugging the girls. More than 70 women have launched a class action lawsuit accusing Mr. Nygard of rape, sexual assault and human trafficking. He's previously said his name will be cleared. The British government is being urged to adopt a tougher stance against Iran and recognise its detention of British Iranian nationals as state hostage-taking. A committee of MPs says the current approach to securing their release is not working and they're being used as bargaining chips. Caroline Hawley reports.
It's nearly 5 years since Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe was arrested. She's the most high profile of a number of British Iranian citizens being held in Iran. The UK government has repeatedly raised its concern, but MPs are now calling for a new, firmer approach. They say the detainees being held on spurious grounds should be recognised as hostages, and that the government should consider sanctions against the Iranian officials involved. The MPs also recommend that the UK now consider the whole of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps as a terrorist organisation.
Researchers at the Australian National University say palm cockatoos, renowned for their human-like musical drumming, are threatened with extinction. They say the birds, described as the Ringo Stars of the animal kingdom, have slow breeding rates and face a potentially catastrophic loss of habitat. The shy and elusive black parrots are found on Cape York Peninsula in North Queensland. And a suspected drug dealer in Peru has been arrested by Father Christmas and an elf. 2 members of a police drug squad dressed up to raid a house and detain a man accused of selling drugs near a school. Officers say they found drugs, balaclavas and a gun. The man in charge of the raid said the festive disguises had added an important element of surprise.
Thanks, Joe. Hard to follow that, but Andy Barwell, what can you do? You've got the sports news for us.
I have somebody who's not particularly happy at the moment. That's the Chelsea football manager, Frank Lampard.